welcome to this week's Euranet Plus debate, where we're talking to politicians, citizens, and journalists from across Europe during the coronavirus lockdowns. We're talking about some of the most important issues that we're facing during this outbreak. And this week, we're going to be talking about the track and trace apps for our smartphones. These are the apps that we're probably going to be asked to download in order to facilitate the end of lockdowns and the recovery going forward. My name is Dave Keating, and with me today, I am joined by two members of the European Parliament, Karen Melchior from the Renew Group. She's a Danish MEP, and then we have German MEP Axel Voss from the Centre-Right European People's Party. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes, hello.
Now this is something that the European Parliament is really taking a very close look at, and it follows the European Commission's strategy on how countries should formulate their exits from the lockdowns. And the strategy did say that these tracking apps could form a part of that strategy. And increasingly, we're seeing governments talk about how the fact that everybody has a smartphone could be used to try to get us out of these lockdowns in a smart way. And this is an advantage that they didn't have, for instance, during the previous epidemics of the past, like the Spanish flu. And so it could be a great tool for showing us who can exit lockdowns, who needs to be careful, and who is at risk of being exposed. But there's huge data privacy concerns here because, of course, the apps are tracking you. That by their very nature, that's what they're designed to do. And so there's big questions being asked about whether geolocation should be used, what kind of data these apps can store, where the data will be stored. So many issues here. And we're seeing these apps being rolled out already in South Korea, in China, and we're seeing things that maybe people in Europe wouldn't be so comfortable with in terms of tracking. So let's talk about what Europeans are comfortable with and how the EU could get involved here. Karen, let's start with you. What are we really talking about with these apps? What's on the horizon in terms of what these apps could do?
What we want them to do is to be tracking the virus and not to be tracking the Europeans. We want to use technology to make sure that we can contain the virus. And this can only be done if the Europeans trust downloading these applications and trust that their data is not being misused. I think it's important that we use proximity data and not location data. We don't want to know where you've been, but we want to know if you've been close enough in order to infect somebody else.
Axel, what's your idea of what these apps should be doing and what they're capable of doing?
So at first we have to have in mind that this is one option of fighting the virus. So the mask, the testing, and also it might be a kind of an app. And there we have to ask the experts in saying, so what do you need really in fighting the virus with an app? And if this is then a kind of an idea in saying, oh, we have to warn and we have to interfere the chain of infection, etc., then we have to think about how we can protect these data already. And I think if we have all a kind of a strong will in fighting the virus for a limited time, then we can also use an app where we might get out of this lockdown a little bit better. And of course, from a data protection and privacy point of view, we can add a lot of criteria in saying, please, only for this purpose, only for this limited time, only for access for experts from the health level. And this might be the ways what we should ask for, and not really talking about, is this privacy theft or whatever it is. We need to come forward in fighting this virus, and this might be also an option.
Well, the Commission has come out with guidelines on how these apps should be developed and how they should respect privacy. And a lot of those guidelines focus on where the data is stored, where it's collected, how long it's collected, and this issue of geolocation. So Karen, I mean, what are your big concerns about data privacy when it comes to these apps?
A big concern for me is putting data privacy and protecting our health as two things that go against each other. I don't think that we can protect the health of the Europeans if we do not also protect their privacy, because you do not want to download an application, and we're all saying that the applications should be voluntary, if you fear that the data will be used against you and that you will be tracked. One thing that I do fear about the solutions that are being proposed is that we're not using the proportionate data. I think using Bluetooth proximity, low energy solutions is the type of data that we need. Which phones have you been close to? Then there are different models that have been proposed. There is a collaboration called PEPPT, and then there is DP3T, which both have two models of collecting data. One of them has a centralized model and a decentralized model. And as far as I read the Commission guidelines, they are actually promoting having a decentralized model where you have as much of the data on your phones as possible. It is important that we do not use the applications to track people, but we use it to track the virus, and that we maintain the Europeans' trust in their authorities.
Axel, I mean, how do you see the balance that needs to be struck here? I mean, I think Germans in particular, this data privacy issue is quite important to them. So how do you strike a balance between making the apps effective enough, or making the data available effective enough so that the apps fulfill their purpose, but also don't make people too scared to actually put these on their phones? Because of course, if people don't download these apps, it's not going to do very much good.
So as far as I understand the system, we need at least 60% of the population in downloading this app and using these. So then it might be effective. And of course, then this is a question of trust, if this can be done by voluntarily downloading these, or should we go kind of a step further than if this is not happening? This is a question. We are not there yet, but at the end, because of the damage the virus is causing, we have to think about all options at the end. And therefore, I would say we shouldn't concentrate too much on how this is stored at the end. Yes, we prefer a decentralized model from a European perspective, but at the end, the question should more be, who is accessing these? Who is using these? And can we limit these in a way better? And I think storing is not the big question. It's politically all of a sudden this big question now, but this is not really the most important question. The most important question is at the end how we can secure privacy for our citizens with this option I already mentioned, and how can we also analyze these data if we need a kind of an European approach on these. So it doesn't make sense if we have 27 single national solutions for it, but not a kind of a cross-border solution. We need a European approach on this. We need an architecture for these apps where they can be compatible, also cross-border. And this is what an app, an European app or national apps and compatible to one data sets or whatever, this might be then the effective way forward. And still having in mind the purpose is to fight the virus and not to give up privacy for our citizens.
Karen, would you agree that storage is not so much what we should be focusing on now?
No, because we are discussing the architecture, the models, the way that we want these applications to work. And I think we should use the European legislation that we have to enable the use of technology and not to stop it. And I think it helps the member states to develop the best applications if they use the guidance that we have in legislation and also that's been given by the Commission, which recommends using decentralized models, because we should build privacy into the design of the applications and not just trust the users subsequently.
Axel, go ahead.
Yeah, but I can't see so far a political party in saying we don't want a decentralized model. It's the question more in saying how decentralized it should be, that is still working also for European perspective at the end. But so far we have three architectures: a totally centralized one, kind of a totally decentralized one, and one in the middle. What I would like, what I'm preferring is to have decentralized from a European perspective, that member states, they are collecting on their own, and then we have a kind of a European approach that we can analyze the data in a way that we will get also a big picture for the European level. And this is something what we should have in mind. Otherwise, the cross-border and the single market option is something what we not really can fight for at the end. So that's why we need a kind of architecture. It doesn't have to be centralized, but we need a possibility for experts, not for the government or whatever, for health experts in saying we need this data, and therefore we are analyzing these and getting a kind of an overview where might be the hotspots and where we have to tackle these a little bit better and so on. And this is why we are asking for and have a good European architecture for these apps, that we can get knowledge out of it to effectively fighting the virus.
Yeah, let's talk about that European architecture. A lot of members of the European Parliament are calling for a single EU app. That would be for a variety of reasons. One is you could better control whether it's following EU data privacy law, if it's just one, but also if somebody's traveling to different countries in Europe, you don't want to have to download the local app for France, the local app for Italy, each place you go. Karen, what are your thoughts on this single EU app? Is it possible, and is it even advisable?
We have a European emergency phone number, 112. And it's been in existence for at least 20 years, and still a lot of countries don't use it. So I think the important thing is to make sure that the national applications are interoperable and that we can share data when needed, so that if I am traveling with the Danish application to Germany, that I will still be able to send tokens to the people that I come into proximity to, so that they will be notified if I am tested positive. It is not crucial for me that we have one European application, but just that the applications can talk with each other. And I think when we're in Brussels and when we're dealing with European politics, we often take for granted that member states think in a European manner. Unfortunately, the Danish application that is being developed as we speak does not use any of the three models that Axel mentioned. They have been looking to Norway, and they are actually not, as I can see at the moment, been building on the European Commission guidelines. I hope that they will build the Commission guidelines into the application, but this was not their first thought. Their first thought was let's do something on our own and they didn't even look to Europe to get guidance.
Yeah, Axel, is the horse kind of out of the gate already on this? To think about more standardization rather than a single app.
Yeah, so I totally agree with Karen. The manner of thinking in our member states is not in a European way so far. And probably because of this urgency, it might be somehow acceptable that we are not coming with one app throughout the EU or whatever. But what is happening now is we get a whole bunch of apps, and this is commercial and the other is state-owned. And then we have metadata for telecoms, and we have these contact apps, and we have these GPS and Bluetooth and so on. And this, I would say, has to be led somehow by the European Commission or European Union in a way, and it might be also be a kind of a political effect if we would have one single app. It doesn't means that we all need the same construction at the end, but at the end, one app for every construction would be wonderful, that we have probably a kind of a European fashioned way that everyone can identify with this app and saying, so this is for my safety in Europe, and this would be a kind of a different political tool in saying this creates also identification. But therefore, I would say one app with a lot of structure beneath of these might be helpful, that the citizens are knowing this is for my good and this protects also my privacy.
We have a final question for both of you. Which do you think Europeans would trust more, a private developer of these apps, or if they are government developed and initiative? Who do they trust more with their data, companies or the government? Karen?
It depends a little bit of the country, but I would say, and I would also myself wish that it would be a government developed app, because we need the data to the health authorities. We don't need it in the hands of private companies.
Axel, what do you think?
So in Germany, I'm sometimes not quite sure if there's still a kind of the thinking of the 80s, the government and the state are the evil, etc. So that's why, but I would say we need here a kind of a situation where health experts can analyze and can fight, and therefore probably if this is a kind of a state-owned or private-owned app, I don't care at the end from the result, but I think a private-owned company shouldn't benefit from a situation like this, and therefore for these strategy fighting the app, probably it's a kind of a state-owned app would be better also in trusting, because I can't really say that my government or my state is a kind of place of the evil, and I'm trusting them. And even if we have then limited the access only to this health administration or health system or experts, then we should have more trust in it, and some of these discussions are obsolete.
Well, that's all the time we have for this debate. Certainly a lot of discussion yet to come as these apps develop. I want to thank you both so much for joining us today, and thank you all at home for watching either live or recorded. Tune in next week, where we'll be talking about more of the issues facing us all during the coronavirus lockdown.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, and bye.
Bye-bye.